father was dying. He was on that bed taking his last breaths. And he begged. He said, Chioma, do not go. Stay. Stay and carry this family. And I looked at my dying father and I disobeyed him. I left my sister to carry his burden alone. I left. I gave everything. I came to this house with my whole heart. And this is what I get.
Your father was a wise man. He knew what you were before you even knew yourself.
I buried my father to marry your son. I left my family. I left everything. And this is what you give me.
4 years I have cooked and cleaned and prayed and cried in this house. 4 years I have watched my own body fail me month after month.
And you are standing there, calling me a witch.
Because that is what you are. No normal woman stays empty this long. You did something. You are hiding something. My son deserves better than you.
I disobeyed my dying father for this marriage. I chose this house over everything I had. God, please, tell me it was not for nothing. Tell me it was not for nothing.
Chioma, what happened? Why are you on the floor?
She is being dramatic. Ignore her.
Do not tell me to ignore my wife on the floor. Chioma, look at me. I am here.
I left my dying father, Emeka. I left my sister. I left everything I had. And your mother is calling me a witch. How much more? Tell me how much more I can lose before there is nothing left of me.
You are not losing anything else. I promise you. Not one more thing. I am here.
The night Ezekwesili Okoye called his daughters to his bedside, the compound was so quiet you could hear the palm trees breathing. He was 61 years old, and the sickness had taken everything from him except his voice and his pride, and even those were going fast. 5 daughters he had raised on this land, 5 strong, beautiful daughters who had never given him a moment of true shame. But 5 daughters and not one son, not one. And in the world Ezekwesili had grown up in, the world his own father had handed to him like a law written in blood, a man without a son was a man whose name would die with him. He could not allow that. He would not. Adaize was his firstborn, 29 years old, quiet and steady, with her mother's cheekbones and her father's stubborn eyes. She sat closest to him, her hand already holding his, already bracing herself for whatever was coming. Chioma was the second, 26, sharper at the edges, quicker to laugh and quicker to argue. She stood near the window with her arms folded, watching her father's face with an expression nobody in that room could fully read. Their mother sat in the corner and said nothing. She had already cried everything she had. There was nothing left in her but waiting. Ezekwesili spoke to Adaize first. "You will not marry," he said. His voice was weak, but the words were iron. "You will stay in this compound. You will bring a man here, a man who will take our name. Your children will be Okoye. My name will not die. You are my firstborn. This is your responsibility." Adaize closed her eyes. One tear ran down her face. She did not wipe it. She nodded. Then Ezekwesili turned to Chioma. "You," he said, and his voice was different now, softer, but with something underneath it that was almost like an apology. "You will go. You will marry and go. But Ada stays. Promise me Ada stays." Chioma looked at her sister. Adaize still had her eyes closed. "Papa," Chioma said carefully, "promise me." The room was so still. The candle on the bedside table threw shadows across her father's face and made him look already like something from another world. Chioma said, "I promise." But even as the words left her mouth, something inside her was already pulling in the opposite direction, a quiet, steady resistance that she did not yet have a name for. She was 26 years old. She had a life she wanted to live. She had a man who was already waiting for her answer.
His name was Emeka, a school teacher from Auka, who had been coming to their compound for 2 years with yams and patience and a smile that Chioma had never been able to argue with. He was not rich, he was not powerful, but he was good, genuinely, quietly good. And in Chioma's experience, that was rarer and more valuable than anything else. Her father died 11 days later, just before dawn, with Adeaze holding one hand and their mother holding the other. Chioma stood at the foot of the bed and watched him go and felt two things at once: grief that was real and deep, and something else she was ashamed of. Relief. Not that he was gone, but that the argument was over, that she could now begin to figure out what her own life was going to look like. The burial was on a Saturday. The compound filled with relatives and neighbors and people Chioma had never seen before in her life, all of them eating and drinking and talking about what a great man Ezekwesili had been. The women cooked from morning until evening. The men sat under the canopy and spoke in low, serious voices about legacy and land and the tragedy of a man leaving no son behind. Chioma moved through all of it like a ghost. She cooked, she served, she accepted condolences. She smiled when smiling was required and cried when crying was expected. But inside, she was somewhere else entirely, sitting in a quiet room with Emeka, imagining a life that her father had not designed for her. 1 month after the burial, she went to Emeka. She told him she was ready. He did not say, "I told you so." He did not celebrate. He just looked at her for a long moment with those steady eyes of his and said, "Are you sure? Because once we start this thing, I am not going anywhere, so you need to be sure." She was sure. The wedding was a small and beautiful, a Saturday in March in Auka, with 200 guests and a canopy of orange and gold. Adeaze came and danced and laughed and held Chioma so tightly at the end of the night that neither of them could speak. Her mother came and wept throughout the ceremony, not from sadness, or not only from sadness, but from the complicated emotion of a woman watching her daughter choose freedom and hoping with everything she had that the choice would not cost her too much. Chioma moved into Emeka's house in Auka with a trunk full of clothes, a box of her mother's recipes, and a heart so full of hope it almost frightened her. The first year was everything she had imagined. Emeka was the same man in private that he was in public. Patient, funny, present. He came home every evening. He asked about her day and actually listened to the answer. He was not perfect. He left his shoes in the middle of the floor and forgot important dates, and sometimes went very quiet when he was stressed instead of talking about it. But his imperfections were the kind that made him more human, not less lovable. Chioma cooked and laughed and learned the rhythms of her husband's house. She planted a small garden behind the kitchen. She started selling small chalks to the school where Emeka taught. And within 6 months, she had a steady income and a reputation for the best puff-puff in the entire street. But the child did not come. She noticed it first as an absence, a quiet space in her life that she kept expecting to fill. Then as a concern, then as a weight that grew heavier with every passing month until she could feel it pressing on her chest when she woke up in the morning. She went to the local clinic. The doctor ran basic tests and told her everything looked normal and to keep trying. She kept trying. The months kept passing. The weight kept growing. By the 2nd year, the conversations had started. Mama Emeka, a wide, powerful woman from Newi who wore only black wrappers and spoke as though every sentence she uttered was the final word on any matter, had begun visiting more frequently.
She would arrive on Friday evenings unannounced, inspect the house with eyes that missed nothing, eat the food Chioma prepared without complimenting it, and leave on Sunday mornings with comments that landed like small stones thrown with great precision. My son is not getting younger. In our family, women do not wait this long. I am just saying what I am seeing. Chioma smiled through every visit. She cleared the plates. She held her tongue. She told herself that the woman was afraid, that fear made people cruel, that patience was its own kind of strength. But patience has a limit, and Chioma was approaching hers. The third year broke something open. It was not one moment. It was the accumulation of 36 months of disappointment, of waking up every morning with hope and going to sleep every night with loss, of watching her body refuse to do the one thing the world had decided was her most important function. It was the herbalist her mother-in-law sent to the house without telling Emeka. It was the prayer group that showed up one Tuesday morning, claiming Mama Emeka had called them to pray over the house and remove whatever was blocking the womb. It was the evening Chioma overheard her mother-in-law on the phone saying to someone, not whispering, not even trying to whisper, "That girl is a witch, I am telling you. No normal woman stays dry this long. She has eaten her own children in the spirit world." Chioma stood in the hallway outside the kitchen and listened to those words enter her body. She did not cry. She had already cried so many tears that she had built a kind of wall inside herself. Not cold, not hard, but solid. A place she could stand when everything outside was trying to knock her down. She walked into the bedroom and sat on the edge of the bed and stared at the wall until Emeka came home. She told him everything, every word, exactly as she had heard it. Emeka sat beside her without touching her for a moment, the way he always did when he was gathering himself, when he needed a second before he could speak without his voice shaking. Then he said, "Pack a bag." She looked at him. "We are going to my mother's house right now, and this is going to stop tonight." "Emeka?" "Chioma." He turned to face her, and his eyes were calm in a way that was more serious than anger. "I did not marry my mother. I married you. And I will not sit in this house one more night and pretend I did not hear what you just told me. This ends tonight." They drove to Newe in silence. Mama Emeka was in her sitting room watching a Nigerian movie when they arrived. She looked up with the expression of a woman who had been expecting this visit and had already decided how it would go. Emeka sat down across from her and spoke for 20 minutes without raising his voice once. He told her that Chioma was his wife, that whatever was or was not happening in their home was between him and his wife and God, not between him and his mother. That he had heard what she had said, that he needed her to understand clearly and completely that he would not tolerate it. That if she could not come to his home and treat his wife with basic human dignity, then she should not come to his home at all. Mama Emeka listened with her arms folded and her face arranged into an expression of wounded dignity. When Emeka finished, she said, "I am your mother." "I know who you are," Emeka said, "and I will not tolerate it. I am asking you, as your son, to stop." They drove home in silence. Chioma sat in the passenger seat and looked out the window at the dark road and felt something she had not felt in a long time. Not happiness exactly, something quieter and more durable than happiness. She felt held. It was Emeka who found the doctor in Lagos. He had been researching quietly for months, reading at night after Chioma fell asleep, making calls during his lunch break, asking questions of a colleague whose wife had gone through something similar. The doctor was a specialist in Lekki, a woman with 20 years of experience and a reputation for finding answers where other doctors had found only dead ends. They drove to Lagos on a Thursday morning and sat in a clean, bright office and answered questions and submitted to tests that were thorough and careful
and completely without judgment. The results came back 2 weeks later. It was not a curse. It was not witchcraft. It was a medical condition, a hormonal imbalance that had gone undetected because nobody had ever thought to look for it. Treatable, manageable. Not guaranteed, but genuinely medically possible. Chioma sat in the doctor's office and listened to the explanation and felt the 4 years of wait begin slowly, cautiously to lift. The treatment took 8 months. Injections and medications and careful monitoring, and 2 trips back to Lagos, and 1 very frightening week when the doctor adjusted the dosage and Chioma felt so sick she could barely get out of bed. Emeka sold his car to cover the costs without telling her he was doing it until after the sale was complete. When she found out, she was furious with him for exactly 3 days. Then she looked at his face, calm, tired, utterly committed, and she could not stay furious. On a Wednesday morning, in the 9th month, Chioma sat on the edge of their bathroom sink and held a small white stick in both hands and watched 2 lines appear. She did not move for a very long time. Then she walked into the bedroom where Emeka was still half asleep, and she put the test in his hand, and he looked at it and sat up slowly and looked at her face, and his eyes filled with tears in a way she had never seen before. Not sad tears, not even happy tears exactly, but the tears of a man who had been holding his breath for 4 years and had finally been allowed to exhale. The pregnancy was not easy. There were 3 hospital visits in the first trimester and a frightening night in the 5th month when the pain came suddenly and Emeka drove through Oka at midnight running every light on the road. But the baby held on. Month by month, scan by scan, the baby held on. Mama Emeka was told about the pregnancy by phone. She said, and little else. Chioma delivered on a Tuesday morning in a private hospital in Enugu. A boy, healthy and loud, with Emeka's nose and Chioma's stubborn eyes. She held him against her chest in the delivery room while the nurses moved around her, and Emeka sat beside her with his forehead pressed against her temple. And neither of them said anything for a long time because there were no words that were big enough for what they were feeling. They named him Chukwuemeka. God has done great things. Mama Emeka arrived at their home 3 days after they returned from the hospital. She came alone, without announcement, in a taxi from Newi. She knocked on the door and Chioma opened it, holding the baby, and they stood facing each other across the threshold. The young woman in a blue Ankara dress with her newborn pressed against her chest, and the older woman in a black wrapper with 4 years of cruelty sitting visibly on her face. Mama Emeka looked at the baby. Something moved across her expression, something she could not fully control, something that broke through the hardness for just a moment. The baby was beautiful, undeniably, completely beautiful. Then she looked at Chioma, and Chioma looked back at her without flinching, without anger, without the need to say anything at all, because she had already won. Not over this woman, not over her father's tradition, not over any of the forces that had tried to reduce her. She had won something private and permanent. She had won herself. Emeka appeared behind her. His presence filled the doorway. For a long moment, nobody spoke. Then Mama Emeka did something nobody in that compound had ever seen her do before. She lowered herself, slowly, painfully, with the stiffness of a woman who had never practiced the motion, onto her knees on the doorstep. I said things, she began. Her voice was different, smaller. I said things that were not true, things that were not right. She paused, swallowed. I am asking you to forgive me. Chioma stood very still. She thought about her father's bedside. She thought about the word witch spoken in the dark. She thought about the Omo Igoka, herbalist at her door, and the prayer group in her kitchen, and every month of silent grief, and every morning she had woken up and chosen to keep going. She thought about Adaize back home in that compound, still living inside their father's wish, still carrying a name that was never truly hers to carry. She thought about her son, sleeping against her chest, breathing in the slow, steady rhythm of a child who knows nothing yet about the weight of the world he has been born into. She looked down at Mama Emeka on her knees on the doorstep. "Get up," Chioma said quietly. "Get up and come inside." She stepped back from the door. She did not say, "I forgive you." She did not say everything is fine. She said, "Come inside," which was its own kind of mercy, the kind that does not pretend the wound never happened, but refuses to let the wound be the final word. Mama Emeka rose slowly. She walked through the door. She sat in the chair Chioma pointed her to. And when Chioma placed the baby in her arms, carefully, deliberately, with the full authority of a mother who has earned every single thing in her life, the older woman held him and began to cry. Not performance tears, not the tears of a woman playing a role, real tears, the tears of a woman who understood finally and completely what she had almost destroyed. Adaize came to visit 6 weeks later. She arrived on a Sunday afternoon with a bag of oranges and akara wrapped in newspaper, and the particular quietness of a woman who has learned to carry a heavy thing gracefully. She sat in the sitting room and held Chukwuemeka and watched her sister move around the house, confident, unhurried, at home in her own life, and something in her face was difficult to read. After the baby had been put down to sleep and Emeka had excused himself to give them space, the two sisters sat together in the quiet sitting room and were honest with each other for the first time since their father's bedside. "Are you happy?" Chioma asked. Adaize was quiet for a long moment. "I am managing," she said finally. "Some days I am managing well." Chioma reached across and took her sister's hand. "Papa loved us," Chioma said, "but he was wrong." Adaize looked at her. Her eyes were steady. She said, "I know. I have always known." They sat together in the afternoon light and did not say anything else for a while. There was nothing else that needed to be said. They were two women on two different roads that their father had drawn for them. One who had followed the road and one who had left it. And both roads had cost them something real. But only one of them had led here, to this house, to this child, to this particular kind of quiet, hard-won peace. Outside, the evening was beginning to fall across Awuka. The compound was still. The garden Chioma had planted behind the kitchen was growing in long green rows. Inside, her son was sleeping in his cot with his small fists curled against his chest, dreaming whatever newborns dream. Her father had wanted his name to survive. What had survived instead was something he had never thought to want for her. Her own story, her own life, her own proof that the things people call you in the dark have no power over what God has already written for you in the light. They had called her a witch, but God had the last word, and the last word was life. Was Chioma right to forgive her mother-in-law, or did Mama Emeka get off too easily? Drop your answer below. If this story touched you, please like and subscribe. Share it with someone who needs it today. And drop a comment. We want to hear from you. God bless you.